Barry, it looked like it went off.
When I hit record.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our webcast, Senior Living and Legacy Planning. What are your options? For those who I've not met, I'm Dan Meyer, publisher of BizTimes Media. Today's webcast is presented by BT360, the storytelling arm of BizTimes Media. On behalf of BT360, BizTimes, and our sponsors, AG Architecture, Annex Wealth Management, and St. John's on the Lake, thank you for attending. Many things about 2020 are different, but the need to plan for the future has not changed. Moving into a senior community offers opportunities and benefits you or your loved one might not have thought about. And most retirement community members say they should have planned sooner or say they wish they would have moved earlier. What considerations go into your decision to either move a loved one or yourself into a senior living community? Considerations include location, amenities, the importance of community and socialization, the right time to make a move, and financial considerations including holistic, legacy, and distribution planning. To help you navigate your way through these issues, we've convened a panel of experts in senior living marketing and socialization, wealth management, and architecture to share information and marketplace trends. The slide deck will be available after you fill out the attendee survey at the conclusion. But before we begin, on behalf of BizTimes Media, I'd like to thank you for your readership support and for your print and digital advertising support and event sponsorships. and for attending this webcast today. This is our 25th year as an independent, family-owned business, and we're the only locally owned business media company in the region. To serve the community for 25 more years, we'll continue to need your marketing and advertising support now more than ever. I guarantee that we'll work hard every day to earn your business and to help you grow your business through our custom and integrated marketing programs. If you're interested, please contact our sales director, Linda Crawford. In addition, our award-winning editorial team is always looking for story ideas, especially forward-looking operational insight stories that can help our readers make more informed decisions in running their company or insights on how to be better leaders themselves. And recently, we launched an insider subscriber program. For $8 a month, you can become an insider and receive several insider benefits, including access to all the content produced by our editorial team. It's also your opportunity to support local journalism. Before I introduce the presenters, I want to mention that today's webcast is being recorded and will be available on demand on our website tomorrow. And upon conclusion of the program, please fill out the attendee survey to access the slide deck. So now on to the presenters. Presenters, when I introduce you, please give a quick shout out to everyone. So our presenters are Andrew Alden, Senior Associate with AG Architecture. Andrew, welcome.
Hello.
Hey, Andrew. And Eric Harmon, Chief Design Officer with AG Architecture.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome, Eric. Deanne Phillips, Wealth Manager and Director of Client Learning with Annex Wealth Management. Deanne.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Deanne. And finally, Lucy Klebar. Lucy is the Director of Sales and Marketing with St. John's on the Lake. Lucy.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome, Lucy. So during the presentations and discussion, if you have questions, please submit those using the Q&A feature on your screen. In our program, the presenters will provide their perspectives and share insights and other ideas, and they'll discuss topics like planning for your future, what are your options, design trends in senior living communities, misconceptions of senior living, what to look for in a senior living community, and 3 types of continuing care communities, and then finally, financial planning strategies for your own retirement or your aging parents. So as a reminder, please submit your questions you have in the Q&A feature, and the recording and the slides will be available after the program after you fill out the attendee survey. So now I'd like to turn it over to Lucy Klebar with St. John's on the Lake. Lucy.
Thank you, Dan, and congratulations on 25 years.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be part of the panelists today, and I'd like to start with 2 very common misperceptions or misconceptions about senior living. One is that people think of senior living like a nursing home, and maybe once upon a time that was true, but today it's anything but. Today, senior living is much more like condo living or living in your own apartment home, but even better. You have that same freedom from chores and responsibilities that you would have in a condo, but with many more interests and activities and amenities and groups to participate in, or even launch if you so desire. The second misperception is I'll wait until I need it. Senior living is less transient than apartment or condo living, allowing you the ability to develop deep, lasting relationships if you move while you can really enjoy all that a community has to offer, including the peace of mind of that future care if and when you or your spouse might need it. So if we could move to the next slide, I'd like to talk about how do we plan for our future and what are our options. Some people are like ostriches and they do nothing. They take a wait and see approach, and sometimes an unexpected crisis occurs, and that can take away all the options and ability to direct your own future and be in the driver's seat. Some people say, I'll move in with family. That sounds like a really great idea, but family life typically revolves around the kids and children's activities, and it may be not the same environment that you were hoping for, especially if people are going to work and going to school when we're back to normal. And you can eliminate yard work and household work if you move to a condo or an apartment, but that situation may change in the future, requiring another move. Other people say, I'll hire help in when I need it. That sounds like a really great idea, and it can work well if you can find trustworthy, dependable people to provide in-home care. However, providing that care can become a full-time job for someone in the family, managing those caregivers, and it doesn't really address the issue of isolation or lack of companionship if you're living alone and just have caregivers coming to see you. And lastly, there are people who like to plan and consider all the what ifs and make a plan that will allow them to continue the lifestyle that they enjoy today and into the future. And that's what choosing a continuing care retirement community is all about. You get to choose an enriching, social, secure, independent lifestyle. A continuing care community provides a variety of lifestyles all on one campus. So independent living is typically an apartment home or a cottage style living where people live and manage their own lives just as you do in your home now, but you have services that are provided for you, giving you more freedom and convenience. For instance, you can sell the snowblower. Assisted living is for people who require some help with daily activities like dressing or perhaps personal grooming, or maybe managing medications, but they don't require regular hands-on medical care. Memory support is another level of care that is provided in special environments that take into account the characteristics of the residents that they're caring for in terms of both design and programming. And I know that Andrew and Eric will speak to that in just a moment. And lastly, nursing homes can provide long-term care for people who need regular care from a medical professional, or short-term progressive rehab to help people recover and return back to their home after a hospital stay due to an illness, injury, or surgery. Having all levels of care on one campus is especially beneficial for spouses who may have a different healthcare need than their partner, and for friends wishing to visit each other easily. Next slide, please. 5 reasons people move to a community. Really, number one is to simplify your life. Like I said, you can sell the snowblower, you can sell the lawnmower. You don't have to worry about any of those hassles, the drain leaking. When you go on vacation, you lock the door and you can forget about it. It's also an opportunity to have a different kind of community living, to really enjoy a different kind of lifestyle in community, making new friends, exploring or renewing old interests, taking on new events and activities. Some people like to be really involved in a community. They might be asked to serve on the board of directors or chair a committee or be one of a number of groups that are happening on campus or off campus for that matter. It provides a total holistic approach to wellness, spiritual, social, intellectual, vocational, physical, and cultural. So there are many, many opportunities to explore lifelong learning on a campus. And there's financial security of knowing that you've made this decision, that you did it while you were in the driver's seat and not leaving that choice to someone else. And lastly, the peace of mind of knowing that healthcare is available 24 hours a day, if and when you or your spouse should need it. Next.
This is Eric Harmon from AG Architecture. I'll take my mask off whenever I speak, as will Andrew. As we share this space, it's great to kind of pick up on some of the topics that Lucy had mentioned. And first and foremost, I think the importance of being able to move in when you are young enough to enjoy the amenities and the types of spaces in a senior living environment is kind of crucial and builds upon the excitement and the vibrancy of those communities. One of the pieces on Lucy's previous slide was the socialization and continued learning and amenity style spaces that are advantage of a senior living community. And we wanted to touch on those as one of the design trends that architects are looking at nationally across the country outside of just Wisconsin. So on the next slide, we get to the first one, which is the multiple dining experiences. I think Lucy started to touch on this, but the ability to socialize in the dining area is one of those companion pieces to a senior living environment that you don't get outside of the community. If you move in with family and they might have different work schedules or their focus is on the kids, you're not getting the experience of coming down to the bistro for coffee in the morning, or the grab and go experience during the day, and then being able to enjoy a wine room or a servery for the evening. These types of spaces really bring that sense of community together. On the next slide, there's the other component, and that is wellness. So if you have a gym membership or a club membership, that's excellent. And if you are young enough to be able to get to those locations, you can enjoy the pool or the fitness area at your local fitness club. But as you age in place and you continue to need to work out and find ways to experience more fitness options, having that built into the community is another piece that's attractive and creates a more vibrant area. Most of these designs kind of focus around the resort style layouts, what you might get on vacation, whether it's the pool or fitness rooms, but then also creating kind of the focused studio use so that you can experience fitness in new ways, whether it be through a remote trainer or with a trainer in person who's helping you with a new piece of equipment. The following slide touches on a different type of wellness, and that is the ability to have the lifelong learning and the hands-on activity. As Lucy mentioned, this is another piece that really drives the sense of community, and one of the reasons to move in is that you have these life-enriching opportunities. I can't paint, but I'm certain that if I were to take it up, it would be nice to have 20 to 30 other individuals taking up that type of activity along with me. And as you move into these communities, when you create kind of the cultural aspect of the art or the wellness, the clubs that were mentioned, and the ability to organize a focus group of individuals on common interests is really beneficial. And designing these spaces into a campus means that those clubs have the area that they need to use to be able to take advantage. And then finally, socialization in general takes place both in the inside and outside of the campuses, but designers across the country are working to create impromptu socialization opportunities that are both safe and secure and comfortable for residents to grab a seat at the couch with family or with friends, and the ability to go outside and enjoy an enclosed courtyard. This is a Florida project, so maybe the palm trees aren't appropriate for Wisconsin, but we've had some warm weather this week. We can live with it. The ability to get outside and enjoy the fresh air is very important. So tucking the snow blowers away and not having to rake the leaves is nice, but still being able to sit on the patio and having a space that's designed around that type of use really kind of breeds that socialization.
So Eric, I like what you said about some of the intentionality of what is designed into a community, because I think that's part of what we'll discuss in the next few slides. What people look for in a community, first of all, is the financial stability of it. What is the history of the organization? What is its reputation? Again, back to the events, the vibrancy of both residents and events. Is it a lively community? Do you get a good vibe, if you will, when you visit? Does it feel like a cool place that you might want to enjoy? Is there a sound board of directors and a solid leadership team that's in place that you can talk to? What's their policy? Is it an open door policy, or are residents just a bother for people? I think different communities have different philosophies around that. How does the community approach resident safety and security? And is the community well maintained? When you're on a tour, it's really important to look at, what does the community look like? What does it smell like? How does it feel when you come in the front door? All of that is part of your touring experience on your first date. And if you're a pet owner, it's really important to find out if pets are welcome, because they truly are part of our family. And we'll talk a little more about what to look for in a community. You want to do your homework. On next slide, please. You want to do your homework and find out about the quality of care provided. There are many resources online to learn about an organization's reputation, including cms.gov, the government website for Medicare and Medicaid services, where you can see a community's ratings for their skilled nursing care. A lot of it is about location. We know that real estate rule, location, location, location. 70% of people who retire to a community want to retire in the neighborhood in which they've been living previously. But we have people who've moved from around the country for a variety of reasons. It may be an affinity to some of the amenities here. It may be a long lost tie to Milwaukee or relatives in town, or the biggest pull of all in people moving to communities that are not close to home is being near their adult children or their grandchildren. Again, is it a community in which you would feel welcome and comfortable living? That has to feel right for you. It has to feel, the fit has to feel right. And if it's important to you, is the community socially responsible? Are they a good corporate citizen, and are they good to their employees? Find out from their annual report what they're doing. Talk to employees on the tour, talk to residents about what they enjoy or don't about living in the community, because you want to hear it all, warts and all. And if you can, it's important to tour all levels of the continuum of care. It's really easy to showcase independent living and highlight that resort style living that Andrew and Eric presented and that many communities have today. It's harder to look at those higher levels of care, those more acute levels of care, but it's really important to know what is the community's philosophy and what kinds of services and support is staff providing, and what kind of training are they providing for staff to help provide the best care for residents as they age into needing other levels of care on campus. So that talks more about experience, and I'd like to turn it back over to Eric and Andrew.
Thank you, Lucy. Picking up on that idea of the vibe of the community, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's the experience? What does it feel like? And one of the tools that we use is called a perspective-based sensory assessment. I know it sounds a little fancy, but it's actually very, very simple. It's basically looking and thinking about a day in the life. So you're walking through the building, you're walking through the community. Think about what your daily routine would be. And as you're walking through, take a moment, stop. What do you see? What do you hear? If you're near the bar or the bistro, what do you taste? The idea is that you're trying to think in those finer details to get a better understanding of that place. And we use this on renovation projects and new construction projects both. Next slide. So what we're really talking about is the idea of experience comes in two forms. So right now there's really two big things that are shaping Eric and I. Our experience of this presentation right now is shaped by the room around us, the lighting, if it's cold, it's a little cold in here, the seating, right, the physical environment stuff, and the human stuff, us as individuals and our groups and organizations. So when you take those two things and you put them together, that's the experience of the place. Now, this is important because for us, when we walk through and we do a PBSA on a community, we're thinking about ways to improve. But when you walk through, you're really looking for a deeper understanding of that place so you can understand if it's a good fit or not. For example, when you're walking through a community and you come across a really beautiful gathering place, right? If you just take a moment and think about, do I smell fresh coffee from the bistro? Can I see out the window to the playground where the kids are? What can I hear? And the idea is that you're enriching your experience of that place. You're knowing that place better to understand if it's a good fit. Because the fact of the matter is that after you've moved in and you've lived there for a couple of weeks, you're suddenly going to pick up on all those little things. But wouldn't it be great to pick up on those first and encourage you to move in? And that's why you want to be there, because you can smell the coffee, because you can see the kids play. I mean, that's what it's all about. What is that place experience like?
Picking up on another thing that Lucy said about location, it remains true in senior living environments. And one of the location pieces that we're seeing more frequently now is the move towards the urban environment. So if we go to the next slide, you're going to see a diagram for a project in a suburban area. And this happens to be a typical senior living community. It has several different care levels spread across this happened to be about a 14 acre site. There's natural points of entry. There's a nice, easy way to get into the commons with the front access drive. And there's a large courtyard behind that commons, which is the orange component in the middle. That commons is centrally located between different care levels, whether it be memory care, assisted living, or independent living. And the plan itself starts to sprawl across a generally 4-story structure. This is perfectly acceptable in a typical suburban environment. You've got some fantastic socialization opportunities in the commons, and the courtyard is nicely nurtured between 2 buildings. A lot of positives here. But not everybody is looking for that suburban environment. The ability to move into the city and take advantage of the amenities that are at your doorstep. Milwaukee has a vibrant arts community, the ability to enjoy a play, go to the museum, walk on the Riverwalk, hop on the trolley and take a ride around town. All of those being right at your doorstep are one of the reasons why the convenience of moving into the urban area is appealing. You're already downsizing. Why not downsize to an area where the amenities are at your doorstep? So this diagram shows the same general program of the suburban characteristics, but you pick up on one clear trend, and that is that those uses are stacked on top of each other much more efficiently. In an urban environment, you have 1 acre to do your best. And you take that 1 acre and you take advantage of the surrounding community and the amenities that are available to you at your doorstep to make this just as vibrant or even more vibrant than a suburban environment. Next slide.
I think it's really important to look at the urban versus suburban design. And when you're doing your own personal planning, to ask yourself that question that we used to read about when we were little kids. Are you a city mouse or are you a country mouse? Because country mice want to stay out in the country, and some country mice want to move into the big city and enjoy the amenities, but city living isn't for everybody. There are 3 different types of continuing care communities. Some communities are life plan or life care communities where there's an entrance fee and a monthly fee associated with every apartment on campus. The entrance fee protects your assets while allowing you to plan for and predict escalating healthcare costs, and you're guaranteed care for life in assisted living, memory support, or skilled care. There are communities around the country that are standard fee and monthly fee models. And when you need that healthcare service, it's on a fee for service basis. And lastly, there are communities that are rental communities where there's a month-to-month lease and you pay market rate for those healthcare services when you need them. So let's talk about understanding the fees a little bit, please. So an entrance fee is a one-time fee paid at the time you occupy the apartment to assure your lifetime access to your apartment or your cottage home, use of all the amenities and services on campus, including as a resident that guaranteed priority access to higher levels of care services if and when you should ever need them. There's a monthly fee associated with the apartment or the cottage home as well, a fee paid each month for a wide range of services, the programming, the amenities, and the lifestyle enrichment programs that you can experience in your resort style living. Entrance fees and monthly fees vary based on the size of the apartment or the cottage home, the number of people who reside in it, and sometimes the location or the height. Refunds of entrance fees vary by community and type of contract that they offer. Back to you and Andrew, Eric.
Thanks, Lucy. I think one of the biggest components of this, and I really like the country mouse versus city mouse example. It's a great way to put that. I might use that in the future. But as we look at this, the following slides are just talking about different components for senior living environments and some of the larger planning trends that we're seeing, because there does need to be something for everybody. So from a community standpoint, the more different offerings that you look at or what we're designing to can find the right community for each prospective resident. We did a survey about a year ago, and if we go to the next slide, you'll see the results show that About 50% of the individuals that we surveyed were looking for a CCRC. They were looking for that entry fee model and having the confidence that there will be a bed for them in the future. But that means that 50% were generally looking for something else. And the mixed use multifamily component of that was a large chunk of the population. And I think we strongly feel that that is due to the intergenerational experience of a mixed use style apartment building. If you're in the urban environment and you have all those amenities at your doorstep, can you make your campus feel like the activity is there and people are coming in to experience the arts that you might experience as you live there? So on the following slide, there's just a couple of talking points for the intergenerational experience. And this was a white paper done by Craig Witz, who's a developer who works out of Madison. And he's got a great perspective, but it boils down to a community that looks like a cool mixed use building with micro new urbanist development, more so than the typical single use design that traditional senior living environment might have had. And then on a daily, regular basis, there are non-residents of all ages coming into and experiencing the campus and participating in programs and events. I think Lucy would tell you that St. John's on the Lake certainly has that type of experience. But if you look at it from the design standpoint, the designers need to make sure that we're accommodating the ability to welcome the community in and have that community not feel like they're being a burden on the campus itself. On the next slide, we have a great example, and this is work done by RLPS Architecture, and it's done out in Portland, Oregon. Craig Witz is the name that you see there again, and he wrote his white paper based on the experience of doing Rose Villa, and this is just a different way to look at the senior living environment, where the pizzazz and the excitement of the mixed use can be turned into the amenity style space that makes for a vibrant campus. So on that upper left corner, what you see, that Harvest Bakery, that's their campus bistro. So coming onto that bistro and giving them the ability to feel like they're going to that individual restaurant, and they could maybe later walk down to the art store and pick up some art supplies, that ties into that youthful feeling and creating an environment where residents and non-residents feel comfortable coming in like they're in an urban area. On the next slide, you'll see that same type of concept where you take a mixed use environment and make it a little bit more pedestrian oriented, taking the green space and making that the town square central space instead of a roadway. So again, looking to find different components that strike different people's interest level. And then following that up, there is the next slide starts to show pocket neighborhoods. And this is one that kind of looks at this from a different direction. But senior living environments are always being built upon some core residential ideals of what you want to live in and how it relates to what you're comfortable with. So in a pocket neighborhood, you have the ability to create single family homes that are clustered around a shared common space. Sounds a lot like a senior living environment, but in this instance, it's outdoors. So that shared commons is the green space in the middle. Those strong connections are made via a sidewalk and a front porch. And then you've got the layers of personal space that you are used to in your single family home, in your residential community. But what's different about the pocket neighborhood opportunity is that you're creating that sense of place that's comforting for the senior living environment. And then on the next slide, you'll see how that can be adapted with a couple of different clusters working around shared green space, and then bringing those individuals to a shared clubhouse where you can offer those amenities. Now, this is a much more independent living focused use. The intent is to kind of capture the young, vibrant senior that you saw on the cover page of this presentation. But if this can tie in well to an area that has the healthcare component, if this can be directly adjacent to your assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, and commons area, you can create a very diverse community on a fairly tight campus. Next slide shows a couple more examples of what that front porch active common space might feel like. I really like the slightly snug down in the lower right-hand corner, because as you look at this, there's got to be some density to it to be able to offer to the population and bring residents together and be able to create that excitement around socialization. So the density comes from bringing these buildings a little bit closer together than what you would typically experience in a single family home. They've downsized, they've created a sense of community, and they've entered into a senior living environment. And then following that up, there's one more step you can go to, and that is a potential interest in a co-housing concept. Taking the idea of pocket neighborhoods with shared green space and that active core, and introducing a commons apartment where you have 4 apartments, each having their own front door, each having their own garage, but having a shared common space where that area can be programmed. You'll notice that a lot of these talking points are around the socialization and the programmable aspect of these spaces. That's what differentiates the idea of a co-housing area from a standard 4-plex apartment. It's what differentiates a senior living community from a standard apartment or condo space. Having that programmed socialization and activity built in really provides for youth and vibrancy in the senior. So turn it back over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Eric. I like what you said about slightly snug. I feel slightly snug here in the city on our 5 acres. I think it's really important when you're making these decisions to really do your homework as you're weighing your options. Have those crucial conversations with your parents or with your spouse early about their future plans and their desires and their finances, so that you can help them in the planning process. Evaluate your options and what you'd like to do long before you need to make a move, and plan for those what ifs. Have a contingency plan so that you're ready in the event of a health crisis. Whatever you decide, make sure that you can do it while you can really, really enjoy it. And Eric and Andrew, I know that you stressed that too, that part of being in a senior living community or a multi-use, multi-family community is to be able to really enjoy that environment and not wait until there is a healthcare crisis in your family to start your planning. And that makes sure that you have your plan in place or your parents' plan in place as soon as you can. And I think that's where we'll hand it over to Deanne. But before I do that, I just want everybody to think about, in your planning, if you were to look back 5 years from now, what would your future self say about your decision? So how would you feel about that decision if you could look into the future? Deanne?
Lucy, thank you very much. And, I really like what you said about those what ifs, because there are so many of those that are involved in financial planning and planning our options for the future. So let's take a look at how financials fit into all of this and how the benefits of financial planning fit into any transaction or any transition, but particularly those involving retirement and the changes and challenges that come along with aging and retirement. So the first thing that we like to look at Annex is, who do you think you will actually be in retirement? And while we have these divided up into several different categories, in all likelihood, we're all a combination of a few of these personalities. But as we go through these, kind of think of what appeals to you. The decelerator, I think when we first retire, the idea of never having another alarm clock we have to rely upon is very... is a quality that a lot of people look toward. But a lot of people say they want to be the perpetual worker also, a need for structure, money, identity, might consult, work through retirement. And, we always say A-type personalities don't stop being leaders just because they don't go to their old job every day. Maybe you want to be a volunteer and have a need for productivity, socializing, a sense of purpose. I like the babysitting grandparent because they have the need for family contact again. They want to be near, they want to be involved. As a certified financial planner, a lot of times I hear my clients say, I want to be that wanderer, the need for adventure, travel. often, at Annex, we think of retirement in 3 different sections or decades, if you will. The go-go years right away, the slow-go years, and then the no-go years, right? So as planners, we tend to say, well, during that go-go years, what are the things that is important to put into that financial plan? A lot of people turn and say, well, I'm really an activity seeker. I have a need for recreational activities. Environment is very important to me, contact with other people. So maybe considering living in a senior residence where every day is a vacation day would appeal to you then. The dream follower, need for soul fulfillment. Maybe you want to explore the arts, crafts, hobbies, following what makes your soul sing, I like to say. And in looking at your hobbies, is your hobby expensive? Again, that might need to be built into a financial plan. Finally, that perpetual student has the need to keep the mind active, and maybe you want to take classes, live around educational resources. So all of these factor into where you live, whether you're a country mouse or city mouse, and more importantly, how you live. If you choose to downsize or upsize, what you're going to spend, what those hobbies, travel, family support will look like. All of these things should be discussed with the financial planner. On the next slide, we take a look at a very important aspect of planning also, the fact that we will probably live longer than we think we might. The average length of retirement is actually 18 years. And the average age at which people actually retire these days is age 63. So that gives a typical retiree a retirement that lasts from about age 63 to at least age 81. Now, an increasing number of Americans are even making it to 100. So what this chart shows here is that there's actually they divided up in if you're a couple or not. But what this shows, starting with the left, is if a gentleman makes it to the age of 62, for example, they have a 40% chance of living to age 85 and a 19% chance of making it to age 90. A 62-year-old woman today would have a better than 52% chance of living to 85, 31% chance of living to 90, and even a 4% chance of making it to 100. So, however, look at that gray. That's if there's a couple that are both at the age of 62, and the numbers exponentially rise from here. So, if a couple makes it to the age of 62 today, one of them has a 71% chance of making it to at least 85, a 44% chance of making it to 90, and an 18% chance of making it to age 95. So we need to start thinking about our retirement lasting. It could last well into our 90s. On this next slide, so if we make it through all those years, and a lot of times planners will ask people how much they need to live on just to start. Surprisingly, most people really have no idea. We can't let procrastination stop us. You don't need to come up with the world's most specific budget, but you do need to come up with an idea of what you might need. And so this next slide really takes a look at expenses and an exercise that we like to do to divide those expenses up. And I think if you hit advance, it should populate perfect. So we like to take a look at expenses into 2 different buckets. If we start with the bucket on the left, those expenses are there no matter what the economy does, no matter what the stock market does, right? We need our living expenses. We don't have much control over this bucket. We have to pay our taxes. We've got basic food, groceries, gas, the insurance that we have to keep, our personal upkeep. We don't stop that once we retire. And there, to Lucy's point, is that pet care, because pets are family, right? So those will always be there. And figuring out the base spend of what we need can become a great starting point. Then we take a look at the column on the right. And there also are new expenses that could pop up, like maybe as we age in place in our homes, yard care becomes more difficult, snow removal, home maintenance, things that maybe we used to take care of ourselves, but we may have to hire out somebody to do it. So that bucket on the right is for expenses that we want to have and really need for quality of life and retirement. But are there things that we can control more? Who'd have thought COVID would hit like this year in 2020? I had a lot of clients who had built-in travel for 2020, and that's a bucket of money that they did not spend much this year. But thinking about hobbies too on that right side, like golf can be an expensive hobby. Snowbirding, maybe you and a significant other or friend want to get away for part of the year. So these expenses, again, while very important, we have control over. On this next page, I just want to bring up that actually a lot has happened in 2020 besides healthcare and COVID. There have actually been some seismic law changes in 2020, including two very large acts. The first one, called the Secure Act, was enacted last December, but went into play January 1st of this year. It changed the law around required minimum distributions and when you need to take those out of your 401k or 403b or IRA. It used to be that when you turned age 70 and a half, you had to pull out a specific amount of money because the government wanted their tax. Remember, you put that money away pre-tax. It was 70 and a half. Now the new law is 72. So this, even that year and a half, gives more time for additional planning and opportunity for things like perhaps a Roth conversion between when you retire and when you turn on those additional incomes and before you hit that required minimum distribution. So this timing and this time frame, there's an awful lot of planning that can be done here. Everything in these years really has to do with math. When's it best to start Social Security? When exactly should you turn on that pension? Or when should you do the Roth conversions? So we take all these factors and we figure out how should this all fit and how does this fit into a financial plan? So we built in an example to show you. On this next slide, we'd like you to meet Steve and Sally Sample. Steve and Sally Sample have done the right thing and put aside while they worked, and they have about $1.25 million in investments, and they have about another $550,000 in their house. That makes up their total net worth. On this next slide, we get into some more specifics. So Steve is 66 years old and still plans on working for one more year, retiring at the age of 67. Sally is 65, a retired school teacher already. Now their life expectancy that you see here is to the actuarial table. So Steve, we have him living to 86 and Sally to 91. And you can see that they have this adult daughter, Cindy. Now let's take a look at their goals on the next page, because without goals, well, we've done the right thing and saved money, but he who dies with the most doesn't exactly win. So a large part of working through the financial plan is figuring out what the couple wants individually and as a couple. So this is an important step, and it can actually require, it's several moving parts. At the top, you see, first of all, the retirement ages and what they think they'll need as a base spend in retirement. That first bucket, that have to have expense bucket. There's a $60,000 annually or $5,000 a month. They also identified as a goal, they might want to move into a senior age-in-place facility. They heard about that. They kind of think that's exciting, a senior residence. They also want to travel and spend $10,000 for the first 10 years in their retirement. Through discussion, they also agreed they want to leave about, in today's dollars, $500,000 to their heirs, their daughter and their daughter's children. Now, this is what we call legacy planning and financial planning. Estate planning and legacy planning really are kind of two different things. So estate planning might be those documents you have to have, your will, your powers of healthcare and financial attorney, powers of attorney, very important. You may have your a trust potentially in place there, but that's really the documents that describe your voice and follow your instructions, maybe beyond the grave, but how you want your assets to pass. Legacy planning can also be what gifting you might want to do during your life, or gifting to charity or children, or setting up a small family scholarship and teaching your future generations in your family what your family values are and how to give. So this is all a part of estate planning and what can work into a financial plan. These are the ideal goals that they had in their minds for Steve and Sally. And their question was, gee, the way we have our finances seated right now, can we support it? So we go forward a slide and we take a look at their net worth. They have a checking account, so ready cash. They've got a taxable account. That's like a traditional style brokerage account. Sally has an IRA that she rolled over from her 403B as a teacher. And Steve has his 401k that he's actively contributing to. Steve also has a Roth IRA. A Roth is after-tax money, but when it grows, everything it earns is tax-free. And then you can see their real estate there as well. Next slide takes a look at their income. So remember, Steve's working one more year and he makes about 140,000. And we as planners have seen their Social Security statements, and we tend to do what's called a Social Security maximization strategy. So what that's a fancy way of saying is it looks at the best timing of their cash flows and when each of them should start Social Security. Mathematically, we ran this and we said that they're best off with Sally claiming at her full retirement age. That's the number that Social Security gives you at the top on the front of your statement. And hers is 66 and 2 months. And that's actually coincidentally the year that Steve retires. Steve is best off waiting until he's age 70 to claim at this point. Now, remember that for every year he delays taking Social Security beyond his full retirement age, it's a guaranteed 8% return annually. If he waits till age 70, the latest delay point for Social Security, he'd have to live to about age 82 in order to make the math work. So there's a little bit of guesswork that goes in financial planning here too. Now they both have pensions as well. Sally is taking hers and Steve is starting his upon retirement. So they'll have an income stream starting next year. Remember that everything here on the slide is taxable to some degree. So it's important to work through tax planning and the tax ramifications of the timing of all of these and estimating what their taxes will look like. The next slide shows their living expenses. So here at the top is their $60,000 bucket, that $5,000 a month. We also carved out property taxes, Medicare expenses, and that $5,200, by the way, is in 2020 the national average for a Medigap plan plus the Part B that comes out of Social Security of $144.60 per person, and then plus a little average for out of pocket. So that would be like what I would call a Cadillac Medicare setup with a supplemental plan, national average at $5,200. They also have a travel budget, and we can see that they're Wisconsin residents and they file Form 1040 for federal tax purposes. Now we're getting to the fun part. Now we put all of that together and we take a look, and the software runs everything. The first thing it does is say, and this is how their plan looks with current expenses in their current house in retirement. So this is not them moving. This is them aging right in place in their house. If they stayed in their home and continued to pay those property taxes, they start with about $1.25 million and end up when Sally is age 91 with what feels like in today's dollars about that same amount. Now, this is making several assumptions, and this is interactive software, so we can actually take a look at those assumptions, change things, change retirement dates, all that, and really play around with it. It's static for these purposes, but I want to share with you that we're looking at inflation of about the historic average of 3%, and the investments, we're assuming a moderate or balanced portfolio, averages 6% after fees annually. After inflation, a net return of 3%. That's pretty conservative and not a very high bar. But we as planners like to make the plan conservative because, after all, no one ever complains if there's too much money left over. We just don't want to see people run out. So now then we look at the cash flow picture, including all their expenses and income. So looking in 2021, and you can see that little sunset on the page. And if we could just go back one, perfect. You can see that little sunset in 2021 when Steve retires. Sally starts Social Security. Steve defers his until age 70. And then you can see that blue bar kind of gracefully swoops up a little bit. And then in 2040, Steve, this is what we like to say, successfully completes his retirement. So that's the sunset on his life. And at that point, the money begins to arc a little bit on the downside because Sally's down to one Social Security payment. Maybe the pensions adjust a little bit and she's in a single taxpayer bracket. Now, we know that the market does not go up 6% every year like clockwork, because that would make all of our planning so much easier. So what we do is we run something called a Monte Carlo simulation. And yes, just like Monte Carlo in Nevada, and just like at the craps table, right? It takes actually real historic, real stock market returns over the last 30 years. It runs 1,000 different random simulations of real returns and layers it into their financial plan to really stress test it and see what their level of success potential is. Success is not running out of money. And here's where we go to this next slide, because this is a wonderful news for them. Remember that, again, if they stay in their home, and yes, they have equity in their house, but it's locked up, right? They don't have a mortgage. They've got the 550 outright, but they're living in it. With the data that's in the plan today, they have a 100% chance of not running out of money. In fact, with real market numbers on the right, you can see there's a 95% probability they'll have about $1.4 million in what would feel like today's dollars. I took the inflation factor out. So what it would feel like today when Sally is 91. That dotted line, by the way, was their goal for their legacy, for their family. So what does this tell us as planners? There's room there in case they had a long-term care incident potential. That's one of those what ifs that Lucy was talking about earlier. We as planners look at all that and think, what if there was a premature death of one spouse? What if there was a long-term care incident that lasted for a while? How would that financially impact the other person? So there's a lot of extra movement ability and the surplus built into their plan right now. So now here comes their big pivotal question. What if we were to move into a senior age-in-place facility? What would that look like? On the next slide, what we did is built an advanced plan. This plan actually sells their house, their $550,000 home, and uses the proceeds to buy into a position, an entrance at a senior age-in-place facility. So say it was a $400,000 buy-in, which is what we used in this example. They sold their house for $550,000 minus moving expenses. Of course, there's 6% to the realtor, their closing fees. So there's a little equity left over. You see that little green pop in the left there on the top of the blue bars. And we removed their property taxes. They won't have that anymore. And their housing expenses out of their base. And instead, we built in from $60,000, we built $48,000 for their annual spend. So putting it at about that monthly fee for their maintenance on an ongoing senior residence. We did keep the vacation and the healthcare expenditures because they'll have those. What happens over time is they basically, we look at all these as planners, and they're basically out the cost of their house, but they gain all the amenities of their senior residence. And this goes back to their goals. What did they want? Remember that first slide. Who do they want to be? They identified as people who need to be around other people, who wanted the amenities, the social activities, the keeping their mind active. So again, the slide you're looking at is in today's dollars, and it does not even factor in if Steve has any life insurance or long-term care needs. If there's no life insurance benefit built in for Steve, if he passed, of course, that would be added to the plan. We look at those as planners and build in against those incidents as well and how they impact the plan. So finally, what we know so far, and of course, life isn't linear, it always changes, which is why we address financial planning continually. It's not a one and done situation. As life changes, we change up the plan, we build in those scenarios continually. Now let's take a look at the last slide here, our Monte Carlo effect. And you can see here, it's still wonderful, 99% probability of not running out of investments. Remembering they still have all their sources of income, with the median 95% probability that Sally will still have about $1 million in today's dollars, plus her income at age 91. So definitely enough to leave that nice legacy for Cindy and her family. So these are some of the ways that financial planning can help build out goals and answer financial projections. So Dan, we need to see if there are any questions or thoughts from our panel or audience at this point.
Yes, Deanne, thank you so much. And thank you to Andrew and Eric and Lucy. This is not your great-grandmother's retirement community discussion. I can assure you of that. Deanne, I want to stick with you for a minute. I hear in conversations that I've had and discussions that we had prior to this,
when do you get started? At what age do you start doing this? I mean, some people might say, well, I'm 50 years old and I don't need to think about that for a while, or I'm 35 years old or 25 years old or 70 years. I'm sure you've had incidents. What do you tell people, and what has been your experience?
Well, and if Mary, we could go to slide 43. Yes, there's a perfect little time frame here. I think it's never too early to start financial planning. I taught my daughter at age 4 with a 4-part piggy bank for investing, spending, donating, and saving. And we talked about what those things meant. So it's never too soon to start putting away. But when we put all those pieces together, I would think we should really, it's never too late, but we should start as soon as possible. And this slide shows that 50, of course, is the first time when you could put that extra, that catch-up provision into 401k, 403b. And then even at age 59, which, on the time frame of what we're growing to here is still pretty young, most plans allow in-service withdrawals, even if someone is still working, into taking their money out of their 401k, putting it into an IRA where they have greater flexibility. Why? It's really for planning purposes, beginning to put all those pieces together, taking all that great behavior of saving here, 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 and coming together in a cohesive plan. Never too early. So don't worry if you're listening out there and you think, gosh, it's too late. We've seen people who come to us for the first time in their 70s and 80s before. We've also seen people in their 20s.
Yeah. And then, okay, once you have a plan, how long or how often should it be updated?
That's a great question. So whenever there's a change of circumstance, so definitely large changes like retirement, death, divorce, disability, you want to have your arms around your financial plan and those what if scenarios before tragedy hits. Because when tragedy hits, or transition, not even tragedy, you're retiring, it's very agitating. There are a lot of emotions in play, right? And sometimes when that happens, it can be agitating and it's hard to listen. It's hard to just trust the plan. So having the pieces in place before transition can become very important.
And then just one last follow-up question before I go to the others, and then back to you. We had some questions about trust funds, and I know that's not your specific area. I know you have a team of people that do that, but you did mention setting up trusts or charitable or for your kids. How and when do you to do that if you're really interested in the legacy planning?
Yeah, so the legacy planning is really important. We actually have 3 attorneys on staff that are in different areas, including taxation, estate planning, and succession planning, just for that reason, because it's pretty complex.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs a trust. Certainly, if you have people under your care, whether they're an incapacitated senior or a minor, there are a lot of good reasons to utilize trusts. So that is definitely something to talk to your planner, take a look, have it at the very least, the basic estate plan. And I think, Lucy, you and I chatted about this just for a moment, but many facilities actually require you to have at the very least that healthcare and financial power of attorney. So if you became incapacitated, the senior residents would know who to turn to help you out.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So back to the facility, and I've made my plan. I'm all set, and now I'm choosing. Tell us, Eric and Andrew and Lucy. Dad's thinking about moving into the community, but he's worried about giving up his workshop in the garden. What are his options? Mom loves being outside, and I don't want to have her not have that opportunity. You kind of touched on it, but describe that a little bit more again in terms of what works best.
I think if I may, and then gentlemen, you can bring up the rear if you will. There are many spaces to enjoy gardening in many different retirement communities, because we know that just because you've moved out of your home doesn't mean you give up that need to weed or to deadhead as your meditation, and that being outside is so important for all of us for our health. So here, I think there are 30 people on our landscaping and gardening committee who enjoy doing that together. Again, it's an intentional group that gets together a couple times a week. I've watched them the last few days with this beautiful weather, enjoying doing things to make the fall gardens look better. We happen to have some raised beds here at St. John's that people can put their names in a hat for to grow anything that's legal. We also have a workshop that's passcoded so that it's safe for residents to use if they want to recane a chair, refinish a piece of furniture, cut woodwork. And that's common in many communities, that we all have different amenities and services that allow residents to either start a new hobby or continue a hobby that they've enjoyed. And Eric and Andrew, anything you want to add to that with your experience?
I would agree with everything you said, Lucy. I would probably only add just a couple things. Gardens and gardening, both inside and outside, very popular when we have design discussions with clients. And workshops are also really popular too. Eric had showed the picture of the area for painting, but there's also ceramics and a whole variety of other amenities. And one of the things I've noticed is when I walk through communities and I talk with residents, if residents have a particular interest in something that is not available, usually the communities are happy to work with them to try to create a club that focuses on, a variety of things. So there's always you're not the only one interested in whatever it is you might think. So there's others there too. And that's the point of these communities, is getting together, having common interests, and having a space to do that. Some of the most fantastic workshops I've seen are at some communities. Model Railroad, wow, amazing stuff. just amazing little vignettes of countrysides and cities, and it also works to pull other people in from the outside community with little open houses. And I can't remember where it was, but I was at a community that used to have a routine over the holidays. The Model Railroad would be themed with Santa Claus, and all the kids would come in and walk through, and it was a very popular thing. So people are interested in those amenities also.
So describe in a broader picture, Lucy, you mentioned, the committee of, growing flowers or workshop, or what are some of the other kinds of committees that people can get involved in? And then from a space planning and design standpoint, how does that work to make sure that you have that space and facility? If you can get into that a little bit more, because that's fascinating. That's something that you might not expect.
I think that almost every community has a food and dining committee, because eating is such an essential, important part of all our lives. And when you're living in community, you want that experience to be even better. So that is a committee made up of both residents and dining staff, so that there is a sharing of ideas and of concerns, and of course compliments and menu planning and seasonal planning. One of the things that came out of that here several years ago was investing in a community garden with a sister community up the street. So Milwaukee Catholic Home has a community garden, and we, not here in town, but they have a community supported garden, and we partner with them because it was more produce than the both of us could use. And so we work together to make that happen, both for residents and for us as a benefit. That's just one example, but there are many. I think there are currently 34 communities that I know of. And so almost every interest and an opportunity to also serve on the board and really be part of the leadership and the structure of the organization, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And then, it kind of sounds like a greatly elaborate and enhanced dorm experience. All the fond memories of those kinds of experience when you have that community as a more younger person. Sounds pretty cool, actually. So Eric and Andrew, let's say we've got a lot of the amenities, but winter's coming, and what in your expertise do you have that encourages people to, they walked outside, maybe there was space to walk outside. What about doing those kinds of things? I mean, you touched on the fitness facilities earlier, but just generally walking when that's kind of the preferred way of exercise for some people.
Well, one of the ways that we're looking at that is from the interior planning of a building, to ensure that there's ample views to the exterior and capturing the natural daylight and the experience of those courtyards, regardless of the season. Because we do live in the Great White North, and we do expect for our courtyards to be awfully snowy a couple months of the year, hopefully not too soon as we come off of 70-degree weather. But then additionally, to be able to design the exterior spaces to kind of take advantage of the shoulder seasons, providing cover, providing outdoor heat, providing access from several points that might go out to a porch, might be able to be a screened-in area. Providing those types of uses for outdoor activity gives the residents a broader use of it throughout the year. And then furthermore, in an enclosed courtyard, you might have a path that is maintained. You can work with the landscape artist to ensure that there's some evergreens and some nice hardy plants that'll be attractive throughout the winter. But providing maintenance with the schedule of regularly cleaning off those walkways and pathways, and providing remote heating, there is the opportunity to still go outside and walk around and enjoy the outdoors, even as a resident in the middle of January. So designing those areas to be secure is ideal, because then there's a sense of security and you don't need to worry about slipping and falling and not having anybody to be able to see you. But then also designing them in a way where it might be open to the public or visible of the public, so you can kind of appreciate the main street or the surroundings, but still have this sense of security that nobody's coming to interrupt your experience in the courtyard. I think there's a lot of things that can go into that exterior design.
Very interesting. So Deanne talked about it a little earlier in terms of planning. 50 was kind of the magic age, preferably earlier in some way till they're 70 or over 70 years old, for moving into a facility, into a senior living community. What's the idea? Is there an ideal age? And what's the typical age? And has it been trending up or down? And what are pros and cons for going in early or going in at the right time or not at the right time? You know, maybe you wait too long.
I think that's a really great question, Dan. And I think it depends on the individual, because I think every one of us knows people who were born old or they have old souls. And sometimes couples have different health needs. So we've had people as young as 62 move in, and we've had people move in at 94, still active and vibrant in their lifestyles. So the sooner you get here, the more you can enjoy a community. And I would say our average age at move-in today is about 74. And that's people taking some time to really plan their decision and make their move. And being here early gives you that opportunity to enjoy the community, to enjoy the amenities, to make new friendships. I've seen people fall in love again and get married again in their lifetime. So there's some really beautiful things that we get to observe it and support as staff when people come early. When you come too late, it's hard to enjoy all the amenities on campus, like splash time. Family swim time is a really cool time in the pool where kids are giggling and screaming and noodling. Not when the marathon swimmers want to be in the pool, but an important time to share nonetheless. And you can't enjoy those things if you wait too long.
Eric and Andrew, that's probably one of the misperceptions. As I saw some of those designs from throughout the country, I mean, it's very appealing at any age, it seems, to be moving into a facility or a community like this, because of all that I mean, if I can go to the bistro, I mean, if it's all right there, why wouldn't I? What are you seeing? Are you seeing it trending even lower than what Lucy said?
I would add that when we tour communities and we talk with residents, there's two topics of conversation always come up. First one is the food. That's always a topic of conversation. The second one is, I should have done this sooner. Should have moved in sooner. I don't have to shovel. I don't have to worry about the yard anymore. I love being around my friends. And so those are the two things that always pop up.
As we're in this webinar, there are other conferences that are just starting up now. Leading Age is a national senior living organization who puts on not only local Leading Age Wisconsin type conferences, but also national conferences. And that starts tomorrow, actually. And that's going to be a virtual conference as well. But the key to that is that we are going to those conferences and we are hearing stories about the types of amenities that campuses are using to draw in a more younger adult, a more active adult, different pressures that they might be experiencing from the multifamily or mixed use sector. And I think that's why we talked about those components of a mixed use lifestyle, or even the pocket neighborhoods, as a method to attract that younger senior. A a lot of the barrier to entry is whether they desire to move into a large campus, whether they feel like they desire to have 350 of their closest friends share the same door that they do. So that's where looking at different planning components and giving them something that may feel a little bit more familiar could be an option to attract a younger senior. And that's where the single family homes of the pocket neighborhood come into play, or even finding ways to reduce the perception of the length of the corridor in some of these buildings. You know, St. John's is a fantastic tower, so their corridor isn't too long. But when you look at some of the other models, you could walk for a day before you get to your apartment. And eliminating that barrier to entry is one of the things that designers are looking to make betterment on campuses.
We'll get back to some of the kind of the developer designer community owned questions in a second, but for Deanne and Lucy, let's talk a little bit more about the cost. I mean, and the range. You don't have to get specifics, and I know that it varies so much depending on the size and the length and the location. You know, maybe the length of time or at what point you come in, but go into that a little bit more in terms of you know, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, other types of options for folks. And then, you know, one of the questions was, you know, how do I know if my parents can afford the community they're considering? Deanne, you touched on it certainly with your worksheet, but maybe you can talk about that a little bit more, Lucy and Deanne.
Sure, thanks, Dan. We have quite a range of apartments here, and many communities do. There, you know, very few of us are designed as a cookie cutter solution and a one size fits all, because our lives are changing and our needs are changing. So we have apartments from 600 square feet to about 2,500 square feet at St. John's, and the entrance fees and monthly fees have a very wide range, just like there is in terms of the size of the apartments. So entrance fees range from about $188,000 to about $1.2 million for that range of apartment sizes. And monthly fees vary too, from about $2,500 to about $7,000 per month. And they're you know, the amenities are built in. Many of the amenities are built into that monthly service fee.
Mm-hmm. And Deanne, you know, with that asset of a home, which, you know, a lot of people have, what a great way to take advantage of.
Yeah, it's really a behavioral question, because when you first sit with people don't consider the equity they have in their home. They think, well, my kids get my house. And then I turn around and I say, what will they do with it? And they say, oh, they'll sell it. Okay, so you're sitting on this equity that you can be utilizing, right? And then still building in the legacy plan for your kids. So I guess I like to look at it and say, let's take a look at it, a range. Let's look at what you want goal-wise. Let's look at what you can afford. And that opens up a plethora of opportunities, right? As opposed to just saying, well, I think I need X amount. Let's take a look at the range of what works for you. Now, what I used in the spreadsheet was a $400,000 entrance fee and then $4,000 a month. So kind of the middle range of what Lucy was just giving you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Andrew and Eric, let's just take a step back. Let's say you're an investor in a senior community, or you're looking at having yourself or your parents go there. You know, what are some of the things? Let's say the place I'm looking at doesn't have the curb appeal. You know, how can I improve the first impression? Or, you know, it's a slightly older building, but you said location. It's just a fabulous location. It's right where my family is. How do you start there? You know, maybe if you are one of those community owners, and if you're you know, how much land do you need to make it worthwhile from a financial standpoint? If you could just touch on that a little bit, yeah, I think it would be interesting perspective if you could share. Did we lose you guys?
They're muted.
Here we go.
All right. Sorry. I think one of the biggest pieces of this is that the master planning or strategic planning effort of campuses should really never stop.
Mm.
You're always going to be reinventing yourself for the next generation while you continue to serve the current residents of the campus. So there's a lot of communities that we might have designed or were designed 15 to 20 years ago that are working now on a complete overhaul of the interior layout or strong additions to the campus to start to pick up on some of those components that they've heard about in presentations like this. But a lot of research goes into that and making sure that you can afford to make those efforts, making sure you have the equity in your campus or have the endowment able to fund some of those renovations. But I think the ability to do a strategic planning or master planning exercise in your existing campus starts with your existing residents to get a feel for their experience within the campus. They're going to give you some insight that no prospective resident really can because they've been living with it for years. So you might learn some components that might surprise you. And if you can invest some money in your existing infrastructure, it's going to make you look more attractive and people will recognize that this is not a community that wants to stand still. And then to look at what you might be doing to benefit your campus and move into the next generation, you can do the same type of focus group or master planning session with those prospective residents to get the interest level of what they might be looking for. So if you combine those two, you can develop a pretty good master plan.
Lucy, you mentioned that earlier. One of the things that you need to do from a potential resident standpoint is to look at the financial strength of the organization that you're considering. And yeah, that sums it up right there. Speaking of that, I've driven by Prospect Avenue a few times over the last several years. You had some changes, or you seemingly continue to have changes. Can you describe that? And when that occurs, is there a special assessment that goes out to the residents? How does that work?
There isn't an assessment, Dan, and yes, we've had a lot of changes. So to Eric's point, we went through that master planning process. Actually, the board did several years ago, and then in 2017, Beth and I were charged with starting to sell our new North Tower because the tower is part of a reinvention of healthcare. We had a very dated healthcare center. It was built in 1975, and it wasn't serving us anymore. Didn't serve residents well, and it didn't work well for staff. And the only way on our limited footprint to reinvent ourselves was to build the healthcare center beneath the new tower of independent living. So we've had ongoing construction here for 2 years, and I can't tell you how many months, but it's been quite an endeavor for everybody on Prospect Avenue, including St. John's residents. And there are no assessments. Entrance fees in our community are used to fund all of our expansion and renovation and capital expense projects. And the monthly fees that residents pay provide the dollars for operating expenses. And one of the things that people can look for when they're looking at the health of the community is how many days on hand of cash does a community have to be able to operate if everybody decided not to pay their bills. That's a sign of financial health in organizations that financial organizations look for in communities like us to rate us from a bond standpoint.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, Lucy, what is the most important component, when selecting a community?
I think it's fit, Dan. I think it has to feel right. It has to have that right vibe and feel like somewhere you could really be happy in. To your point earlier, it is a lot like college, and some areas are more like dorm life than others, but it's really about, will you be happy and comfortable here, and could you see yourself enjoying the lifestyle that this community has to offer?
Does anybody have any more questions before Andrew and Eric, and then Deanne has last closing remarks? Eric and Andrew, do you have any additional thoughts or parting words of wisdom?
Nothing more than to say that the senior living environment is an exciting place to be. With the aging population and the diverse nature of interests and populations, there's nothing but growth in senior living.
And you mentioned this national organization that I think is going on today. You do work throughout the country, from what I understand. One of the preeminent companies of your kind, because this is really one of your specialties.
Senior living is our specialty, places where people live, but particularly senior living. And throughout the country, we're having similar conversations about the type of amenities and experiences that residents can have in campuses.
Yeah, it's interesting with the growing baby boomers, that's for sure. And Deanne, with all that money that these baby boomers have, they just have to put a plan in place. What final thoughts do you have?
Though at some point, I believe that everybody feels they deserve financial planning. And it's just kind of a function of sometimes we as humans tend to um, procrastinate and put it off because it seems just like such a daunting task. But behaviorally, most people who are out there have done the right thing. They put money aside for themselves. So it's a second set of eyes to begin to help gather in and put the pieces together and take a look at where the overall picture is. Because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right?
Right.
So ultimately, having something in place is just going to make you feel better about the choices you have in your future.
Mhm. Okay, well, with that, I think we'll conclude. We've gone through a lot of the questions. We don't want to take up too much time on everybody's part, but thank you so much. Andrew Alden, Senior Associate with AG Architecture, Eric Harmon, Chief Design Officer with AG Architecture, Deanne Phillips, Wealth Manager and Director of Client Learning with Annex Wealth Management, and Lucy Cleavard, Director of Sales and Marketing with St. John's on the Lake. So folks, these are the experts. The contact information is here on this slide. They would be happy to answer any other questions that you might have. And as you're looking to move yourself or looking to move a loved one, that's the thing. We're in a lot of people are in the sandwich generation where they do need to care for their parents and come up with a plan. As I mentioned, the slide deck will be available online, I believe tomorrow. So when you exit the webcast, a new tab will open on your browser with the survey. So if you could please fill that out, or you can then access the slide deck, that would be great. So we value your feedback very much as we look to have more webcasts like this in the future. So on behalf of BT360 and BizTimes Media, thanks again, everyone, for taking time out of your day, and have a great rest of this day. The big clock says it's 74 degrees.
Beautiful.
So get out there and enjoy it. So have a good rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everyone. It was a great learning opportunity.
Yeah, bye, everybody.
Thanks for having me.